Many times as a best-selling author, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer ran the anti-Bin Laden unit, could have killed him twice. That came out in congressional hearings, but was ordered to stand down. He blew the whistle on it. I remember seeing it in the New York Times and San Francisco Chronicle. They then tried to investigate him, claiming he was using his cell phone to call his wife, which you're allowed to do. Next, they'd accuse him of stealing a pencil, but he was able to get through that persecution. LondonCenter.org is one of the think tanks he works with, and the U.S. Army War College. I'm not going to go through all the things he did as a highly experienced CIA-trained Army intelligence officer, but now he is being censored with a biography he's writing with stuff that's declassified because they don't want him telling what really went on. And that ties into record journalists being locked up, record amount of FOIA requests being ignored, violating federal law and the Open Records Act. It's a felony when they do that. It ties into FCC Commissioner, CNS News, feds may come for Drudge, with the Federal Elections Commission claiming he can't talk about candidates. And if they can knock off Drudge, they can knock off InfoWars. Everybody else, they're already delisting us from the ratings, along with Drudge at Alexa.com. There is just massive censorship going on at so many different levels. There's an iron curtain of suppression descending down, undoubtedly. And so Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer joins us. Overall, before we get into your current case, here's the headline: military redactions of public info criticize Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer and Defense Intelligence Agency have been locked in court battle for 5 years now. And now you're able to speak about it. Courthouse News has some of the report. What do you make, though, Colonel Shaffer, just at the big view first, of the overall climate in this country? I don't think of it as what you see in a free society.
No, I agree with you completely, Alex. I mean, let's be totally clear here. Everybody, this includes elements on the left, elements on the right, basically being censored. A friend of mine who works, Pat Eddington, did a FOIA. He works for a New Jersey Democrat. He's a staff of a FOIA on the Stingray program, and the FBI returned something like 5,000 pages completely blank, completely redacted. So clearly, this is not a left-right issue. This is just a big government versus the everyone else issue. And when it comes to a number of things that are ongoing regarding your issues, our issues, it's all about essentially this White House, more than any other, has been going about trying to essentially make sure that the public is uninformed, that the only sources of information which are available to the public actually come from some approved source by the White House or some minion of the White House. And I thought, it's one of those things where if you don't pay attention, if you really don't watch day to day, look at every single source of information you can. And frankly, Alex, one of the things which I find most interesting right now, one of the best sources of information I get on a daily basis is the Mail UK. A foreign newspaper, because apparently somehow they're not as censored as U.S. media is.
I've got to say that the Daily Mail is one of the best newspapers out there. It covers a lot of celebrity news as well, but it just has hardcore info all the time. And it's one of the few publications that will actually carry what we say and not criticize InfoWars. I mean, take Jade Helm. All we said is, man, there's a lot of military training. We have some of the manuals. They talk about fighting veterans and Tea Party being their next big enemy with no proof. This is part of conditioning. They've had literally 1,000+ publications, CBS Nightly News, you name it, come out and say, Alex Jones and Governor Abbott say Obama is going to invade, and how dare them say the Army wants to kill Texans. So they build this straw man out of that just more and more, and I think it's the complicity of mainstream media working with the White House that allows them to run these hoaxes.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big thing that is in vogue right now. Essentially, as you said, creating straw men, creating phantoms which don't exist at all, yet that become the main issue that the mainstream media follows, and thereby distracting the public from the real issues. And it's really important, again, for your show and for others, Alex, to actually, as best we can, as best anyone can, to state the information as best they understand it. It may not be the top. I was in a bit of the hot water with the Pentagon about 2 months ago when I made a call in January to basically, my sources told me that Bergdahl Sternberg was going to be basically indicted for desertion. I got a lot of heat off that, but it turned out to be correct. So I think it's very important that everybody is best and try to get the best information out they can to the American public as quickly as possible.
Now, you've gone through hell with your fiction books, your nonfiction books, and the new book you're putting together. Tell us about those books for a moment.
Well, the court action, basically, to give your audience a very brief summary, is they attempted, Alex, from day one, ever since I've been publishing books, to go back, essentially redact or basically force me to delete information which is in the public domain. Now, you might wonder, why would a government agency spend so much time, in this case 5 years, trying to essentially pull information out of a book, of 2 books, that is in the public domain? And there's really no clear answer that you can get. I believe, personally, it goes back to, as you mentioned in the introduction, my testimony on Capitol Hill relating to the 9/11 information we had regarding here. Others believe that maybe a continued retaliation by the government against me simply because they don't like the fact I continue to speak out.
Well, I think it's both, but what gives them the right to say that you can't put a clip out of a New York Times article in your book? For those that don't know, you might explain that to them, that they're restricting things that are public. It's kind of like when Gibbs was told, say there's no drone program, when for a decade it was public. It's like saying there is no sun coming up in the morning. I mean, maybe you're not allowed to say that Army uniforms are green next.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, we had a partial victory by the fact that the Judge Collier, ruled flat out that the government cannot take information which I have testified to was in the public record and say that they cannot use that. That is, for example, one of the things that they actually tried to censor me on, which is totally ludicrous when you think about it, is my open testimony to Congress, which is part of the congressional record. The government, this administration attempted to say that information in the public record and in the congressional record could not be used by me in my book. That's how insane this got. And clearly they completely lost on that. We continue to contend, and the other issues the judge ruled with the government, as you mentioned, Alex, it's in the public domain. The information relating to my work in Afghanistan, the contents of the Bronze Star, all these things which they're now arguing should be classified, to me, are totally insane by the fact it's been in the public domain for almost 10 years. And it is almost an Orwellian attempt by the government, almost because they can do it. They're going back now, attempting to rewrite history. And to me, it absolutely makes no sense. It wastes the taxpayer money. And in this case, because we did actually win on the account of the fact that they tried to keep out the clear testimony, they've lost that piece, and they're going to have to pay the court fees for my lawyer as well. So this is where, their continued obstinance about things that are clearly in the interest of the public to know, and them fighting it, it really makes it look...
sure. Well, it's also getting worse. I mean, I see the headlines every day where now the White House just said 2 weeks ago, no more 4-year period. We're not going to respond, period. I mean, that's totally arrogant. It's totally illegal. But it's like opening the borders up. Now, I've got to shift gears because you're such an expert on Al-Qaeda, on ISIS, which obviously is the same Wahhabist group. What do you make of the FBI saying at least 49 states do have ISIS in them? This attack in Garland that it would have been in, like, Chicago or something. My God, it would have taken the police hours to respond, or imagine London. What do you make of that and the recruiting power of these groups in the West? Because, as you know, a lot of the recruits are being pulled out of the West.
Right. Well, 2 things. First, ISIS, unlike any other group within the modern era of our anti-terrorism effort, have adopted a very effective strategy of using social media. They're very slick. They have actually paid a lot of money to bring Hollywood types in and make some very slick videos. And this goes to my second point. They've been able to focus on a group, a specific group, that is essentially vulnerable to their message. And there's a lot of folks out there. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. I found it totally laughable when all these people just don't have jobs. It's totally insane. This is all about a very severe form of extreme racism, where they believe that they are the superior race, that they have the right to basically dominate everybody else, and if you don't choose to be dominated, you can die.
That's right. I mean, isn't this the modus operandi from all over the world? It's a lot of times it's even upper middle class, spoiled brat kind of gangbanger types who want to be somebody and want to go be in an adventure and want to go rape and rob and do whatever they want. I mean, isn't this just a legion of scum?
Exactly, and they've been able to hit that nerve, and so they're able to bring these people in, and many of them, and I think in the case you saw in Texas, and I think you're going to see more of this. And by the way, a shout out to James Comey. James Comey, I do believe, is trying to do the best he can in very difficult circumstances by the fact he recognizes all these people. But we've got to do more, and essentially they're going to continue to come until we just stop them where they started in Iraq and Syria.
Stay there. I want to come back and finish up with that and then get into the larger ISIL invasion. The Islamic State has taken credit for this attack with their moron converts over here to radical Islam. We'll be back. I'm Alex Jones with Colonel Shaffer. Stay with us. We're talking to best-selling author, American soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, who was blocked twice from taking out bin Laden, confirmed right before 9/11. Very interesting, because I guess you need that enemy. A lot of folks know that I wrote the book on, and now it's even in the New York Times, on exposing false flag terror, letting groups attack you, wind-up toys, things like that. That said, Islamic State, before they were even Islamic State, when they were the Syrian, Free Syrian Army, I was exposing it, tip of the spear, getting the military to talk about it, to say we won't be in al-Qaeda's Air Force. Ron Paul picked it up, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. Colonel Shaffer was at the tip of the spear in Congress saying don't do this. We were all there. Exposing it, we started getting real threats, and I'm not supposed to get into it because law enforcement got involved and stuff, but real stuff with ISIS. And you've now seen them, up there attack the event with their wind-up toys up there in Garland. I recognize this as different, and I see a lot of liberals, a lot of trendies. May Day March this weekend, I shot video at, had folks kind of dressed up like that. A lot of Islamic State things at public events. So it's kind of a trendy thing with young people, is the point I'm getting at. That's why I say I believe it's a real threat. What do you say, Colonel Shaffer?
Oh, it is. No, I think these people have struck a nerve. And some of these young people actually suffer from what you talk about. It's kind of a society that's very artificial. It's hard to fix. And what's happened is, instead of people seeking the truth and seeking to become better people, what they do is they see an opportunity to belong to something. And as you mentioned right before the last break, they see this as an adventure. I mean, many of these kids, I actually work with a group called the Association of British Muslims in London, who are attempting to stop the radicalization. It's interesting because many of the Muslims who are the British Empire, from essentially the old empire states of Pakistan and India, see this as a threat. Many of them have assimilated to the British society, and they don't like this very extreme brand of Islamic hate. And it actually damages the brand, which President Obama doesn't seem to understand. This is Islamic terror. So happening right now, as you point out, is that these people, these bots, essentially, are being recruited. And it happened in Australia last year, where a bunch of these folks who were recruited were essentially told to do jihad in place. Don't come to Syria. Do what you can to disrupt the society you're in. So I think that's where this is all going. This is why James Comey, the director of the FBI, said that in every state except Alaska, you have elements of ISIS now essentially coalescing and beginning to form. And simply put, the FBI is not big enough to counter every single threat. No matter how successful they are, Alex, eventually one's going to get through the net. I think last night we saw one get through the net because apparently, as we're known to the FBI, said Texas, being what it is, I think responded very quickly and very aptly to the threat. Fortunately, I don't think we're going to see all of our states be able to pick up that tradition.
Well, and exactly, I criticize the FBI for when they get caught manufacturing plots or basically setting people up that are already radicalized. But that's higher-level Justice Department stuff. Usually, just like 9/11, you had FBI at the grassroots trying to stop hijackers, ordered to stand down. In this case, it's the same thing again, where they had them in custody, know they were going to North Africa, and the judge basically released them, even though they got caught lying about it. So I think it's that the grassroots FBI gets their hands tied in real cases.
Right, that's correct. I've worked with a number of FBI agents, and yes, I have friends who are very close to the headquarters, and they're often saying the headquarters is the problem. Obviously, Alex, it's the politics. Once you get past the field agents, it's the politics of up the chain of command, and I think that's where everything gets really off the rails, is here in Washington, D.C.
What do you think Washington's main strategy is? Because we know they were funding the whole anti-Syria deal. Now they claim they're fighting ISIS. You're up there in a lot of classified stuff you can't get into. Is this a real war against ISIS, or what's happening?
Let's go back, and you predicted this, and we've talked about this a couple years